I told my entire family I got demoted to entry level when I actually got promoted to senior director, making more than my surgeon dad, just to see who really cared about me, and only my construction worker cousin James offered to help while everyone else mocked me. So I revealed the truth at Dad's birthday dinner. Then they went nuclear with GPS trackers on my car and my brother Preston, trying to destroy my career until I had to get restraining orders and sign away my inheritance to finally escape their stalking. When I turned 28, I told my entire family I'd been demoted to entry level at the tech company where I'd worked for 6 years. I said they'd restructured, and I was lucky to even keep a job at all. What I didn't tell them is that I'd actually just been promoted to senior director with a salary that made my dad's surgeon income look modest. The real story started 3 weeks earlier when I was at my brother Preston's birthday dinner. I overheard my uncle saying to my dad, "At least Preston has a real career. Banking is respectable. Tech is just a bubble waiting to burst on kids like Jack. Jack is me." I'd literally just led the team that shipped the feature that increased our user base by 40 million. But apparently, I was still the family screw-up for joining a startup. I wanted to know who actually cared about me as a person versus who only respected my title. So I called my parents and told them about my demotion over dinner. Mom's first words were, "Well, how are you going to afford your apartment now?" Dad just shook his head and said, "I told you to finish business school." I explained that they'd cut my salary by 70% and moved me to customer support. I'd have to work weekends and probably find a roommate. Mom said, "Don't expect us to bail you out. You made your choices." My brother Preston texted me later that night. Just one line. "Guess the golden child title is permanent now." I told my sister Emma at brunch that Sunday. She listened to the whole story, then said, "Maybe this is a sign to pivot to something more stable." "Like what?" I asked. "Preston knows people at Goldman if you want an intro." The only person who reacted differently was my cousin James. James works construction and never went to college. The family treats him like he's invisible at reunions. But when I told him the news, he said, "That's rough, man. You need anything? I can spot you some cash till you get back on your feet." I told him I was fine, but he insisted on buying my lunch. Over the next 2 weeks, I started mentioning little things to test the waters. Told my mom I was selling my car to save money. She said, "Public transit builds character." Mentioned to Preston that I couldn't afford to chip in for Dad's birthday golf weekend. He said, "Yeah, probably best if you sit this one out anyway." Asked Emma if she knew anyone hiring. She suddenly got very busy with wedding planning, but James kept checking in. Sent me job listings he found online, even though they were completely wrong for my field. Offered to let me crash at his place if I lost my apartment. Even showed up at my place with a six-pack after I texted that I'd had a rough day. "Those customer service people giving you hell?" he asked. I felt guilty lying to him, but I needed to see this through. My dad's birthday dinner was at the country club 3 weeks after my fake demotion. The whole extended family was there. 30 people all dressed up and pretending to care about each other. Halfway through dinner, my aunt asked loudly how my little computer job was going. Before I could answer, my mom jumped in. "Jack's going through a career transition. We're all very supportive." The way she said supportive made it clear she was anything but. Preston added, "Hey, at least you have a job, right? Some people have nothing." That's when I stood up and clinked my water glass. "Actually, I have an announcement," I said, "about my job." Everyone turned to look at me. Most of them were smirking like they expected me to announce I'd been fired completely. "I wanted to thank you all for your support these last few weeks," I continued. "It really showed me who my family is." I pulled out my phone and showed them the email. The one announcing my promotion to senior director. The one with the salary that made several jaws drop. "I've never been demoted," I said. "I've been promoted. I'm running a team of 50 now. My bonus this year is more than most of you make annually." The silence was beautiful. Preston went pale. Mom's face twisted like she'd bitten into something sour. Dad just stared at his plate. "But James," I said, turning to my cousin who looked confused as heck, "you're the only one who gave a damn when you thought I had nothing." I handed him an envelope. Inside were 2 tickets to the Super Bowl. His team, 50-yard line. His eyes went wide. "What the heck, Jack? You showed me love when there was nothing to gain," I said. "That's worth more than any promotion." Emma started to say something, but I cut her off. "I'm done here," I said. "James, you want to get out of here? Drinks are on me. Forever." I cried myself to sleep that night. The reality of how crappy my family was hitting me all at once. And when I woke up, I noticed my phone had been bombarded with dozens of texts and missed calls. The first voicemail was angry. The second was threatening. By the 10th, they were practically begging to talk about this rationally. The first voicemail from Presto N made my blood run cold. His voice dripped with venom as he threatened to destroy my reputation in tech to make sure everyone knew what a manipulative liar I was. I deleted it immediately, but not before saving a copy to my cloud storage. Something told me I'd need evidence later. My phone buzzed with a text from James asking if I was okay after last night's dinner. I typed back that I was fine, just processing everything. He offered to come over, but I told him I needed some space to think. The truth was, I needed to figure out what my family's next move would be. Preston texted me to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, he was already there, his usually perfect banker appearance slightly disheveled. His hand shook with rage as he gripped his coffee cup. He alternated between fury and trying to manipulate me into apologizing publicly. He insisted I'd humiliated the family and needed to make it right. I sat there calmly, watching him unravel. That's when Mom called. Preston grabbed my phone before I could react, putting it on speaker. Her voice filled the small coffee shop as she begged me to fix this mess. Then came the words that cut deeper than any knife could. She admitted she'd always been embarrassed by me, that I'd never lived up to her expectations. The other patrons pretended not to notice as tears stung my eyes. After I left the coffee shop, Emma started texting me screenshots from the family group chat. Extended family members were taking sides, most of them siding with my parents. Aunts and uncles I'd loved growing up were calling me ungrateful and selfish. Only a few distant cousins seemed to understand why I'd done what I did. Monday morning at work, I tried tried to focus on my team meeting when my boss pulled me aside. He mentioned getting a strange call from someone claiming to be a concerned family member, saying I had mental health issues that might affect my work performance. The receptionist had mentioned it too. My stomach dropped as I realized Preston had already called my company's HR department. Fortunately, my boss knew my work record spoke for itself. He assured me that unless my performance suffered, he didn't care about my personal life. But the fact that Preston had tried to sabotage my career made my hands shake with anger. Later that week, I was at the grocery store when I spotted Mom in the parking lot. She wasn't alone. My ex-girlfriend Rachel stood next to her car, and they were deep in conversation. When I confronted them, Mom didn't even try to deny it. She was attempting to get dirt on my past relationships, anything she could use against me. Rachel had the presence of mind to record the conversation on her phone. She looked at me with pity before driving away. Mom just stood there, defiant, as if trying to dig up ammunition against her own son was perfectly normal behavior. The next morning, I woke up to find Preston had posted old college photos of me partying on LinkedIn, tagging my company in every single one. The photos weren't even that bad, just typical college party shots, but the context he provided made them look damaging. He'd written captions about my history of deception and pattern of manipulation. James called me immediately, warning that Preston had been reaching out to him, asking about my work projects and client names. He wanted insider information about my job, probably to use against me somehow. James had told him nothing, but the fact that Preston was digging that deep worried me. That afternoon, James sent me photos that made my heart sink. Emma was leaving our parents' house with a box of my old belongings. Through the car window, I could see childhood journals sticking out of the box. James's mom had mentioned seeing Emma in my old room earlier that day. They were looking for anything they could use against me. The 48-hour mark was approaching when Dad finally texted me directly. His message was short and brutal. I had 2 days to make this right, or I was out of the will. The inheritance I'd never cared about was now being held over my head like a weapon. My favorite aunt, who'd always sent me birthday cards and checked in on me, suddenly sided with my parents. Mom had spun the story to make it seem like I was having a mental breakdown, that the promotion had gone to my head. The aunt who'd celebrated my first job with me now believed I was unstable. Then things got worse. An old group text where I'd joked about testing people got screenshotted and shared as proof of my manipulation. The message had been about a surprise party I was planning, completely taken out of context. But Preston was using it to convince mutual friends that I was dangerous and vindictive. 3 lunch plans got canceled that week. Friends who'd known me for years suddenly had excuses for why they couldn't meet up. Preston's banking connections ran deep, and he was leveraging every single one. Thursday evening, I walked out to the grocery store parking lot to find my car keyed. The word liar was scratched deep into the driver's side door. I'm really curious about why Jack chose such an elaborate test instead of just having an honest conversation with his family. Something about this whole setup feels like there's deeper hurt here than just that overheard comment at Preston's birthday dinner. Security footage showed a figure in a hoodie, but their face was obscured. I filed a police report, but without clear identification, there wasn't much they could do. My family doctor called me the next day, uncomfortable but feeling obligated to let me know that Dad had approached him during their golf game. He'd been asking about signs of mental illness, whether I'd shown any symptoms during my checkups. The doctor maintained professional boundaries, but suggested I might want to find a different physician to avoid awkward situations. That's when I decided to hire a lawyer. During our first meeting, we discovered my parents were still listed on several of my old accounts from college. Accounts I'd forgotten about, but that could potentially give them access to information I didn't want them to have. The real shock came when I went to the bank. The teller, who'd known me for years, let slip that Mom had tried to access my safety deposit box just yesterday. She'd had an old power of attorney document from when I'd studied abroad in college. The bank had turned her away, but the fact that she'd tried sent chills down my spine. 3 different family friends reached out to me privately that week. They'd seen through my parents' manipulation, but were too afraid of social consequences to speak up publicly. One woman from my parents' church pulled me aside at the coffee shop to tell me something that changed everything. Mom had done this before to my cousin Beth 10 years ago, when Beth had dared to marry someone Mom deemed beneath the family's social status. I started noticing Preston's car everywhere. He was following me to client meetings, sitting in the parking lot taking photos. When I confronted him, he drove off without a word, but I knew he was building some kind of case against me, though for what, I couldn't imagine. James's girlfriend Maria, who worked as a paralegal, offered to help me document everything properly. She said the pattern of harassment was clear and that I needed to protect myself legally. We spent an evening organizing every text, voicemail, and incident into a comprehensive timeline. My neighbor mentioned that my parents had stopped by asking concerning questions about my lifestyle. They'd implied I might have substance abuse issues, asking if she'd seen any strange behavior or visitors at odd hours. She'd told them nothing, but the fact that they were trying to build a false narrative about me was terrifying. The harassment escalated when Preston tried to show up at my apartment at 2 a.m. James had been crashing on my couch that night, worried about my safety after everything that had happened. He blocked Preston at the door, refusing to let him in. Preston had reeked of alcohol and rage, demanding to talk to me about family honor. My high school friend Kevin called the next morning, confused and concerned. Emma had been messaging everyone from our old friend group, asking if I'd ever seemed unstable or shown signs of mental illness. She was fishing for anything that could support their twisted narrative about my breakdown. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by evidence of my family's campaign against me, I realized this was just the beginning. They weren't going to stop until they'd either destroyed me or forced me back under their control. But I had something they didn't expect: friends who actually cared about me and the truth on my side. The morning after James blocked Preston at my door, I discovered Mom had created a fake LinkedIn profile posing as a tech recruiter. recruiter. The profile used a stock photo of a professional-looking woman and claimed to work for a prominent headhunting firm. She'd been messaging my coworkers, asking pointed questions about my stability and work performance. My marketing director forwarded me the message, confused about why a recruiter would be asking such personal questions. I recognized the writing style immediately, the same passive-aggressive tone, the same backhanded compliments disguised as concern. Mom had used similar tactics years ago when she'd driven out Dad's sister from family gatherings. Back then, she'd spread rumors about my aunt's marriage troubles until the poor woman stopped showing up to family events entirely. Rachel sent me something that made my stomach turn. She'd recorded Mom offering her money for any concerning stories about our relationship. In the recording, Mom's voice was clear as she explained how they needed to protect the family name from my reckless behavior. The desperation in her tone revealed just how far she was willing to go. My mentee at work pulled me aside during lunch. Emma had tried to friend her on social media, which seemed odd since they'd never met. The friend request came with a message asking if she'd noticed any mood swings or erratic behavior from me lately. I advised her to block Emma immediately and document the interaction. Building security showed me footage from 3 a.m. the previous week. Someone had been trying different codes at the employee entrance. While the person wore a baseball cap pulled low, the doorman recognized Preston's car in the visitor lot during that exact time frame. He'd been trying to access my workplace after hours. I took all the documentation to the police station, hoping to file a harassment report. The officer listened patiently before explaining that family disputes were considered civil matters unless there was a credible threat of violence. The keyed car, the stalking, the attempted break-ins, none of it was enough without concrete proof of who was responsible. James explained the situation to his construction crew during their lunch break. These guys had known me for years through James, had seen me at barbecues and poker nights. They rallied around me immediately, offering to keep an eye out for Preston's car when they were working jobs near my apartment. One of them summed it up perfectly. Rich family problems, but I was solid in their book. While washing my car that weekend, I found something attached to the undercarriage, a GPS tracker, still in its retail packaging plastic. The receipt inside showed it had been purchased with Dad's credit card at an electronics store near his office. They were literally tracking my every movement. Beth called me that evening. She'd heard through the family grapevine about my situation and wanted to share her own story. 10 years ago, she'd gotten engaged to someone Mom deemed beneath our family's social standing. Mom had sabotaged the wedding venue booking, spread lies about Beth's fiancé's criminal record that didn't exist, and even hired a private investigator to dig up dirt. The relationship hadn't survived the onslaught. I spent hours carefully documenting each incident in detailed emails to my lawyer. Every text, every voicemail, every interaction was cataloged with timestamps and evidence. Maria had emphasized that a clear paper trail would matter if things escalated further. The folder of evidence grew thicker by the day. Emma texted me a long, rambling message about how I'd ruined her wedding. According to her, our parents were now too upset to focus on planning, and several family members were threatening not to attend because of the drama I'd caused. She attempted emotional manipulation, claiming I'd destroyed her special day with my selfishness. My doorman pulled me aside one morning with concerning news. Mom had approached him the previous day, trying to convince him that I was dangerous and unstable. She'd offered him a significant bribe to report on my visitors and daily activities. He'd refused and immediately reported the incident to building management. Preston's professional mask finally slipped during a client dinner at an upscale steakhouse. I happened to be there for a work celebration when he spotted me across the dining room. His reaction was so visceral that his clients noticed immediately. He excused himself abruptly, leaving his confused dinner companions behind. The facade of the perfect banker was cracking. Mom made one last attempt at reconciliation through a voicemail. She offered to forget everything if I would publicly apologize to the family and quit my job. The delusion that I would give up my career to appease them showed just how out of touch they were with reality. Dad's business partners started asking him uncomfortable questions about the family situation. Country club gossip had spread the story of the birthday dinner confrontation, and his professional reputation was taking hits. The social standing they'd worked so hard to maintain was crumbling from within. Emma's fiancé, Tom, reached out to me privately. He'd been watching my family's behavior during wedding planning and was starting to see what I meant about their true nature. The demands, the manipulation, the constant need for control. It was all becoming clear to him as wedding preparations intensified. I realized something important during a conversation with James. My parents could only influence people who depended on them financially or socially. Once someone was independent, their power evaporated. That's why they were so desperate to force me back under their control. Maria's research revealed a crucial detail. The old power of attorney I'd signed for my study abroad program in college had never been formally revoked. My parents' threats relied on this technicality, though Maria assured me it was likely unenforceable after so many years. Still, it explained how Mom had tried to access my safety deposit box. James made a decision that touched me deeply. Dad's company had offered him a lucrative contracting job, the kind that could set his business up for years. He turned it down flat, choosing loyalty over money. Some things, he told me over beers, simply weren't for sale. We spent that evening discussing how money corrupted family relationships. James had seen it in his own extended family. Cousins who only called when they needed loans, aunts who fought over inheritances, the GPS tracker still in its packaging with Dad's credit card receipt inside. That's such sloppy work for people trying to be sneaky. Makes me wonder if they wanted to get caught, or if they're just that careless about covering their tracks. He'd learned early that real relationships couldn't be bought. Despite everything, I refused to use my parents' secrets against them. I knew about Dad's affair from years ago, about Mom's prescription med problem she thought she'd hidden. I could have destroyed them with what I knew, but I wouldn't stoop to their level. Preston contradicted himself spectacularly in front of mutual friends at a networking event. He claimed I'd never had money while simultaneously accusing me of flaunting my wealth. The logical inconsistency was so obvious that several people exchanged knowing glances. His narrative was falling apart. Bank statements revealed the extent of my parents' desperation. They'd attempted to access my accounts 17 times in 1 week, each attempt logged and rejected by the bank's security systems. The sheer persistence was both pathetic and frightening. Sarah, Emma's bridesmaid and my childhood friend, started screenshotting Emma's increasingly unhinged messages about me. The texts showed a pattern of escalating anger and blame. Sarah sent them to me privately with a simple note. She thought I should see what was being said behind my back. My team at work rallied around me after Preston sent a deranged email to our CEO. Without my knowledge, they'd drafted a joint response affirming their confidence in my leadership. They knew who I really was, and no amount of family drama would change that. James introduced me to his crew's families at a weekend barbecue. This was real community. People who showed up for each other without calculating what they might gain. I felt more at home flipping burgers with construction workers than I'd ever felt at country club dinners. Tom overheard something that changed everything. Mom was on the phone with Emma, instructing her to use the wedding to force me back in line. The calculation in her voice, the manipulation tactics being discussed, it was all too much for him. He met me for coffee the next day to share what he'd heard. Several family friends reached out privately to apologize. They'd initially believed my parents' version of events, but were starting to see through the lies. Mom had been very convincing at first, they admitted, but her story kept changing while mine remained consistent. Preston's ex-girlfriend contacted me with a warning. She'd seen this behavior before when they broke up. The obsessive need for control, the inability to accept rejection. He was spiraling in the same way, and she worried about how far he might go. Beth revealed more about Mom's pattern of control. When Beth had gotten engaged to someone Mom deemed beneath a family, Mom had pulled similar manipulation tactics. She'd sabotaged relationships, spread lies, and used every tool at her disposal to maintain control. The pattern was clear and decades old. I made sure to protect my teenage cousin from being dragged into the conflict. When Mom tried to pump him for information about me at a family gathering, I intercepted and firmly told her to leave the kids out of this. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. My work team independently refused Preston's attempts to poach our clients. He'd been calling our major accounts, suggesting they might want to reconsider working with someone so unstable. Not a single client took the bait. My professional relationships were built on years of trust that couldn't be destroyed by whispered lies. Mom's tearful voicemail manipulations stopped having any effect. I'd stopped listening to them entirely, deleting them unheard. The emotional terrorism only worked if I allowed it to, and I'd finally learned to protect myself from her tactics. Tom witnessed Emma screaming at me in a parking lot after a chance encounter. She blamed me for ruining her wedding reputation, for turning her fiancé against her, for destroying the family. Tom's face showed his dawning realization as he watched her unhinged behavior. He was starting to understand who he was really marrying into. Former colleagues reached out in support after Preston's LinkedIn campaign backfired. His desperate attempts to smear my reputation had only made him look petty and vindictive. People in tech talk and word spread quickly about his harassment campaign. My lawyer confirmed that the GPS tracking and fake profiles constituted clear harassment. The documentation needed for a restraining order was nearly complete. Every text, every incident, every piece of evidence painted a picture of escalating harassment that no judge could ignore. Emma told friends that I'd sabotaged her wedding venue booking, claiming I'd somehow interfered with the reservation. Tom discovered the truth. She'd simply forgotten to pay the deposit on time and was looking for someone to blame. The scapegoating pattern was becoming obvious to everyone around her. Dad's secretary quietly informed me about immediate plans to change the will. She'd always been fond of me and thought I deserved a warning. The threat that had been hanging over my head was about to become reality. I realized with perfect clarity that I stood to lose nothing I actually valued. The inheritance, the family name, the social connections. None of it mattered compared to my integrity and the genuine relationships I'd built. They could take their money and their conditional love. I had everything I needed. Preston showed up in my office building's lobby during an important presentation. He sat there for hours, just watching the elevators, making his presence known. Security eventually escorted him out when he refused to leave. I handled the presentation flawlessly, despite knowing he was downstairs. The extended family Christmas card list arrived at various relatives' houses. I'd been conspicuously removed while James had been elevated to a prominent position. The petty gesture revealed more about my parents than they realized. They were rewriting family history to exclude me. My consistent behavior throughout the ordeal convinced the remaining skeptics. While my family's story changed constantly, mine remained the same. Truth has a quality that lies can never match, and people were starting to notice the difference. Tom confided that he needed to postpone the wedding to work through family issues. Privately, he told me he was reconsidering everything. He couldn't unsee who they really were, couldn't pretend the manipulation and control were normal. The wedding might be postponed indefinitely. My parents made a last-ditch effort to reconcile through my godmother. She called me tearfully, begging me to consider their olive branch. But when I asked for specifics, it became clear they wanted reconciliation on their terms. Me apologizing, me quitting my job, me falling back in line. I politely declined, stating my boundaries clearly and finally. I would not apologize for revealing the truth. I would not quit the career I'd built. I would not pretend their conditional love was enough. The door would remain open if they ever wanted a real relationship, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Preston's reputation at his bank began to suffer as his behavior became known. Clients requested new bankers, uncomfortable with his volatility. The golden child's shine was tarnishing rapidly. James's family surprisingly officially adopted me as an honorary cousin at their family reunion. No formal announcement needed. I was simply included in everything, treated as one of their own. This was what real family felt like. Mom's book club friends started distancing themselves after her manipulation became obvious. She'd tried to recruit them into her campaign against me, but the desperation was off-putting. Her carefully cultivated social standing was crumbling as people saw her true nature. I presented the complete timeline of harassment to my lawyer. The evidence was overwhelming. Stalking, defamation, attempted breaking and entering, GPS tracking. Any reasonable person would see the pattern of escalation. Dad's business partner mentioned considering Preston too volatile for the promotion he'd been gunning for. The family drama had spilled into Preston's professional life in ways he hadn't anticipated. His actions had consequences he couldn't control. Emma admitted to Tom she'd always resented Jack's independence from family money. The admission came during their pre-wedding counseling session, which Tom had insisted on after witnessing the parking lot confrontation. The therapist later told Tom privately that Emma displayed concerning patterns of blame shifting and manipulation. Tom spent that night at his brother's apartment, processing what he'd learned about the woman he'd planned to marry. Documentation showed clear pattern of escalating harassment over 6 weeks. Maria organized everything chronologically: the voicemails, texts, stalking incidents, vandalism, fake profiles, and attempted break-ins. The judge would be convinced by the sheer volume and progression of evidence. Each incident built upon the last, showing a family systematically trying to destroy someone who dared to expose their true nature. Final evidence included Preston's hammered voicemail confessing to the vandalism. He'd called at 3 a.m., slurring through an angry rant about teaching me a lesson. His confession was clear. He'd keyed my car, he'd been following me, and he wasn't going to stop until I apologized publicly. The recording would be the cornerstone of the restraining order application. James's construction crew offered to help me move to a new apartment for fresh start. They showed up on Saturday morning with trucks and muscle, refusing to let me hire professional movers. As we packed boxes, they shared stories about their own family dramas, making me realize how universal these conflicts were. Money and pride destroyed relationships across all social classes. Preston showed up at my office with Dad and Mom for an intervention. They'd convinced building security they had a meeting scheduled, but my assistant had already alerted me to their presence. I watched from the security office as they sat in the lobby, Mom clutching tissues dramatically, while Dad checked his watch impatiently. Preston paced back and forth, his banking suit wrinkled from stress. My boss threatened to call police if family didn't leave immediately. He'd been monitoring the situation since Preston's first call to HR and wasn't about to let them disrupt our workplace. Security escorted them out while my entire team watched from the windows above. Several co-workers offered support afterward, sharing their own stories of toxic family relationships. Emma blamed me for Tom leaving, posted unhinged social media rant. The post accused me of sabotaging her happiness, of being jealous of her perfect life, of manipulating Tom against her. Friends screenshot it before deletion, sending copies to both Tom and me. Her mask had completely fallen away, revealing the same vindictive nature as our mother. I spent that evening alone, questioning if exposing them was worth losing all family. The apartment felt empty as I looked at spaces where family photos once hung. But then James texted a photo from the barbecue, me laughing with his crew, surrounded by people who accepted me without conditions. The empty frames didn't matter when I had real connections. I decided to maintain no contact, despite lingering sadness about what could have been. The decision felt final as I blocked their numbers, removed them from social media, and instructed my lawyer to handle any necessary communication. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, no matter how much we wished otherwise. Decision to move forward triggered Preston's final desperate attempt at control. He showed up at my new apartment building, having somehow discovered the address. The doorman called immediately, recognizing him from the description I'd provided. Preston stood outside for hours, alternating between pounding on the door and leaving rambling voicemails about family loyalty. Family tracked me down at James's house through social media post from construction crew member. One of the guys had posted a photo from our poker night, tagging the location without thinking. Within an hour, 3 cars pulled up outside. My parents' Mercedes, Preston's BMW, and Emma's Range Rover. They demanded a family meeting, claiming they wouldn't leave until I faced them. Mom claimed I destroyed the family while I calmly listed their actual actions. Standing on James's porch, I recounted each incident: the stalking, the vandalism, the attempts to destroy my career, the GPS tracker, the fake profiles. Mom's tears dried up as she realized I had documented everything. Her manipulation tactics didn't work when confronted with facts. Dad admitted he changed the will, but I could earn my way back in. The offer was exactly what I'd expected: complete submission in exchange for money. He outlined the conditions: public apology, quitting my job, moving back to their neighborhood, attending family therapy where they'd control the narrative. The price of their love had finally been stated explicitly. James's mom stepped forward, telling Dad exactly what she thought of his parenting. She'd raised James alone after his father left, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She informed my father that even their pastor would say you couldn't buy love, that real parents supported their children unconditionally. Her words carried the weight of someone who'd actually sacrificed for her family. I faced the choice between easy reconciliation with financial benefits or maintaining integrity. The inheritance was substantial, enough to buy a house, start a business, secure my future. All I had to do was bend the knee, play their game, pretend the last 2 months hadn't happened. The old me might have been tempted. I chose freedom over family money, signing away any claim to inheritance. My lawyer had prepared the documents in advance, anticipating this moment. I signed them on the hood of Preston's BMW while my family watched in shock. The pen felt light in my hand as I wrote a away their final hold over me. Preston stepped aggressively toward me, but stopped when James's crew stood up in unison. 5 construction workers rose from their chairs on the porch, not threatening, but clearly protective. Preston's fists clenched and unclenched as he calculated his odds. He muttered something about it not being worth it and stepped back, his bravado evaporating. Emma's final manipulation attempt failed when Tom arrived to support me. He'd been tracking the situation through Emma's erratic texts and came to ensure she didn't escalate further. Seeing him standing with me instead of her broke something in Emma. She turned on our parents, screaming that this was their fault for raising us wrong. Mom's tears didn't work when everyone saw through the performance. She cycled through her usual tactics, sobbing, guilt-tripping, threatening sewer slide, claiming chest pains. But James's mom just shook her head, recognizing manipulation from years of dealing with difficult people. Even Dad seemed embarrassed by the display. I walked away with chosen family as blood family imploded behind me. Preston and Emma turned on each other in the driveway, blaming one another for the failed intervention. Mom screamed at Dad about his weakness. Dad threatened to divorce her if she didn't get control of herself. Their perfect family facade shattered completely. In the driveway, Dad quietly admitted I might have had a point. Away from Mom's influence, his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. He looked older than his years, worn down by decades of maintaining appearances. For a moment, I saw the father he could have been if he'd chosen differently. I offered a single olive branch, telling him when he was ready to be real, he knew where to find me. The offer was genuine, but came with conditions. Any relationship would be on my terms, built on honesty rather than money and manipulation. He nodded silently before returning to the chaos in the car. 3 months later, I thrived in my new city with real relationships. The promotion had come with relocation options, and I'd taken the opportunity to truly start fresh. My new apartment was smaller than the old one, but felt more like home. A postcard from James sat on my fridge, sent from a job site in Colorado. Mom sent birthday card with just 2 words inside. I'm sorry. No return address, no phone number, just those words in her careful handwriting. I held it for a long moment, considering whether to respond. The apology felt genuine, but incomplete. I filed it away, not ready to open that door yet. 1 year later, I stood as James's best man at his wedding. The construction crew filled the wedding party, men who'd shown me what brotherhood really meant. James had asked me months earlier, saying I was the brother he'd chosen. The ceremony was held in his mom's backyard, simple but filled with genuine love. My parents watched from social media as James's wife posted wedding photos. I knew they were viewing them because Emma's friend mentioned it casually. They saw me laughing with my chosen family, saw the genuine joy on my face. They saw what they'd lost by choosing control over connection. I'd lost my inheritance, but gained something priceless. The ability to recognize real love had been hard-won through pain and betrayal. The strength to demand authentic relationships came from surviving their manipulation. The wisdom to know that family isn't about blood or money, but about who shows up when you have nothing to offer but yourself. That was worth more than any trust fund. Standing at that wedding, surrounded by people who'd proven their loyalty when it mattered, I realized I'd actually won. Not in the way my family measured success, but in ways that actually mattered. I had friends who'd helped me move without being asked. I had a chosen family who celebrated my victories and supported me through struggles. I had integrity that couldn't be bought or manipulated away. The restraining orders had been approved months ago, creating legal boundaries where emotional ones had failed. Preston's banking career never recovered from his public meltdown. Emma's wedding to Tom never happened. Mom's social standing crumbled as her manipulation became widely known. Dad continued going through the motions of his life, successful but hollow. Sometimes I wondered if they ever truly understood what they'd lost. Not just a son and brother, but the chance to know me as I really was. They'd been so focused on control that they'd never seen my actual value. Their loss was profound, but it was also their choice. My success continued to grow, built on merit rather than connections. The team I led expanded. The projects we delivered changed the industry. I mentored young developers who reminded me of myself, kids from working-class backgrounds who just needed someone to believe in them. James would visit when work brought him to town, and we'd grab beers and talk about everything except family. The money I would have inherited sat in trust funds and investment accounts I'd never touch. But I had something more valuable, the knowledge that every achievement was earned, every relationship was genuine, every success was mine alone. That truth was worth any price. Check out my account for more videos and like because it helps more than you think.